My personal experience is to find a way to go all in. I think that if you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, it's never going to reach its potential. So I love the old metaphor of burning the ships, the Napoleon story of them, the conquerors landing on an island and they get off and they have to make it work. And to ensure they make it work, they burn the ships. There's nothing to go back to. And I think that most entrepreneurs at some point have to make that decision. Like, I'm going all in.
Startups with Stu is a podcast for anyone living or wanting to live the startup life, either as a founder or a team member. Your host, Stuart Draper, was a 9-time Inc. 5000 honoree before age 40. This show dives deep into the exhilarating world of entrepreneurship with guests that are seeking advice from Stu for their startup or business owners that want to share their entrepreneurial journey. Listeners always walk away with actionable ideas of what to do to take their startup to the moon. Startup life can feel like a roller coaster ride. And with Startups with Stu, you're likely to turn your roller coaster ride into a rocket ship ride. Get ready to uncover the secrets to startup success from visionary founders and savvy investors who've transformed groundbreaking ideas into thriving ventures.
This episode is brought to you today by PodUp. PodUp.com is the leading all-in-one AI-powered podcasting software. If you've ever considered having a podcast, want to get started, go to PodUp.com and check it out.
Welcome to Startups with Stu. Today we have with us our special guest, Mr. Michael Johnson, founder of Perfect Point Marketing, owner of Get Found First and Perfect Point and
Spot on Solutions.
Yeah. Michael, good to be with you today.
Yeah. Thanks, Stu, for having me. It's always great to have a conversation with you and just, catching up like friends.
Well, and thank you for having me. So this, if you're watching the show frequently, this is not my studio. We're actually at Michael Johnson's headquarter office for Get Found First in Blackfoot, Idaho.
We are. Yeah. This is the office we remodeled. It was originally built in 1907. It's an old
JCPenney, right?
Yeah, ZCMI, actually.
Oh, ZCMI.
Yeah,
okay.
for any Mormon historians, you'll know what that is.
Yeah.
But it was an old ZCMI and then a JCPenney and an office supply store, and now it's a digital marketing agency.
So cool. So cool. Well, this is a unique episode because both of us are entrepreneurs in our own right. Both of us are entrepreneurs in the digital marketing space, fresh out of college entrepreneurs, started young. So we both started in the CEO life young. And Michael actually acquired GetFoundFirst.com from me in 2013. No, what would it be? Yeah, it would have been like
15.
2015. So I started Stu-Kent in 2013, worked on it for a couple of years and decided I could sell Get Found First and just focus full time on Stu-Kent.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, to this day, I think one of the best business decisions I've ever made.
Cool. Well, let's dive into that more later. I'm excited to talk about the deal because don't you think that there are just those times in your career where it's like, that's a milestone. That was a big turning point.
That's a moment I'll look back on the rest of my life and be like, that was a choice that I made that was a good choice. And that it changed the life of employees and myself and my family. And you'll just you could pick 10 of them and that would probably still make the list.
Some of those moments you can't force those, right? It's like a lot of cosmic stars align for things like that to happen.
Well, I think it was Clayton Christensen who said that business is a spiritual game. And I completely agree with that. I don't care what you ascribe to or what you believe in. I believe that we spend so much of our lives at work, so much of who we are as entrepreneurs, our identity. It's kind of tied up in that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, if business is a spiritual game, then I also believe there's a higher power that's sometimes involved in making things happen for us.
Yeah. I 1000% agree. So let's step back to where your entrepreneur story begins because it's well before Get Found First and before we met and that acquisition happened. So, tell me, what was it like as a kid? Did you have experiences then?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple moments that I think forged my desire to be an entrepreneur. And it honestly starts with growing up as a kid on a ranch out here in Idaho. So the first thing is I grew up doing 4-H and FFA as a kid. we raised beef cattle on our farm out here in Blackfoot. My parents, the house my dad lives in is 5th generation. So his family has been farmers and ranchers in Blackfoot since the ground came from the federal government.
Wow.
So pretty cool. But I learned the basics of business from my time doing 4-H. And what I mean by that is, I know for a lot of you may have never heard about this, but we'd raise a livestock animal like a beef cat, like a steer
Or a pig.
or a sheep or whatever. And there were times I did all 3 in a summer. But I remember, we'd sometimes use our own animals to, they'd have a baby and we'd raise it, we'd feed it, we'd take care of it, and then we'd show it and sell it at the auction.
At the fair.
At the fair. Yeah. At the Bingham County or fair or the East Rhino State Fair, we'd sell our animal.
Okay.
And it's a market animal, so it's going to get slaughtered. But I remember, we would plan for how much it cost to acquire the animal, how much we paid to feed it, how much maybe equipment or other things we needed to take care of that animal. And then we'd sell it and I'd get a check. And my dad would sit down and he'd be like, revenue minus expenses equals profit. This is what you're taking home.
This is what you get.
And as a kid, that was my mission fund. I got a little bit to spend. And I learned the basics of finance of, hey, that's how I'd buy my school clothes, or that's how I'd, whatever. When I wanted my first pair of Jordans or my first PlayStation, it came from that. And I realized very early on that if you want something, you've kind of just got to go get it.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I think growing up on a farm, I always had everything I needed, but I didn't ever have everything I wanted. And, and that was the lesson I learned, is that if I wanted something else,
go work for it.
I had to go work for it.
Yeah.
And so that was really, really important. And then this leads me to the second, I guess, foraging moment. So that all happened from the time I was 8 to 18. I'd raise these 4-H animals and we'd sell them, and we'd do things on the farm to earn a little extra money. We'd always joke that my brother would make me do all the work because he knew that I really wanted the PlayStation. So eventually I'd just buy it and then he could enjoy it.
Work hard, work smart, not hard.
Yeah, that was my middle brother. And my middle brother's also an entrepreneur.
Okay,
So we both ended up on the same path, but we always joked about how I was the one who would make the initial capital investment and buy the PlayStation or whatever, and he could play it. But the second thing that happened is I didn't know that I wanted to really be an entrepreneur. I always thought I'd have a career in politics, or I was always thinking I did high school policy debate, and I was really into that. And
you'd have been a good attorney too.
Yeah, and that's actually I think for a while I wanted to be an attorney. It was always something like that. Attorney, do something in politics. Loved that stuff. But I remember, so it's some people may have heard this story before, but when I was in high school, I had one class my senior year, my last semester, and it was fly fishing with Coach Rhea here at Blackfoot High School. And during that semester, we'd make a fishing rod and you could leave school and go fish or whatever. So that whole semester, that's what I did. Right? I made a rod and reel, and I made a fly fishing rod, and I tie flies and do all kinds of stuff. And so I'd do that from 9 to 10. And then at 10, I'd be done with school. And so I'd go home and I'd eat a bowl of cereal and watch Sports Center. And then I'd go to work 4 o'clock. And growing up on a farm, that lasted maybe 3 days. My dad was like, you're not living in my house under this roof and sitting around doing nothing from 10 to 4 every day. So my dad's like, you got to go. So I worked at Kessler's, the grocery store here in Blackfoot, little family-owned store. If you follow the people over at Full M House, Kelsey Fulmer, she's the Kessler clan. Yeah. I worked at their grocery store.
My dad, by the way, worked there when he was a kid. It would have been the 60s.
Yeah, my dad worked there. He ran the meat department when he was in high school. Cool. So I worked at Kessler's, had a great job, but I worked from 4 to 10 in high school. So I went into the manager, McKay, and I was like, hey, can I have more hours? Can I work, maybe at 11 or 12? He's like, nah, man, sorry. We don't need any more help at that time. And you're just gonna have to work the evening shifts. And so I went home and I was like, dang it, Dad, sorry, can't do that. And he's like, well, then if you can't find something else, then you're going to come home and you're going to fix fence, work cows, move pipe, do all the crappy stuff that my dad was doing that I didn't want to do. So I went to my best friend's dad was the vice president of sales at Nonpareil, which is a large potato packer here in Blackfoot.
The gunny sack company. They
Yeah,
have the big gunny sack. At least that's how I remember the brand.
Yeah, Nonpareil sold, they actually kind of patented or had invented like the dehydrated potato process. So they sold a lot of dehydrated potato flake internationally to like Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of stuff, but they were a huge company. And so I went to my friend's dad and I was like, hey, Scott, you have anything? Like, I'll do anything. I just don't want to work on the farm. And Scott was like, yeah, man, you can come in and work in the office and organize files and folders and do all this stuff. And I was like, all right, I'll call it an internship, whatever, just so I don't have to go home. I'm like, what do I get paid? And he's like, how does like $12 an hour sound? And I was like, serious? That was a ton.
That was good.
I was making like $8 an hour. So I was like, $12? Seriously? And it's like in an air conditioned office and I can just like come in at 11 and work till 5 and have my evenings with my girlfriend. And he was just like, yeah, sure, dude. So I went in there to Nonpareil and I did fine for a couple weeks, but I got really bored. And so I was like, can I help out in sales or can I do anything else? And they came to me with, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to digress, but this is just super important. They had a huge contract with Walmart. And this Walmart contract Walmart kind of sucks to work with from a fresh, like, pack, like vegetables and fruits.
That's not the first time that's been said on the podcast.
Yeah, sorry, I'm probably not groundbreaking, but the way it worked with them is they had a contract to send potatoes to like 150 stores at 3 distribution centers. And what they had to do is you had to forecast how many potatoes Walmart needed. And if you didn't send enough, you'd get a strike. 3 strikes and you lose the contract. And we're talking like tens, if not nearly $100 million contract with Walmart. If you send too many, then they put them back on a train, they send it back to you. And by the time they come back to you, they're usually bad. So it's just waste. And so rather than lose the contract, they were always sending like 7 to 10, 12% more as an overage to avoid kind of this strike. And Walmart gives you all these tools to forecast. They used to anyway, back in 2008. They would be like, hey, here's what we did during the holidays and here's what happened with the weather. Or, tons and tons of reports. So I just started exporting the reports and putting them in a pivot table. And then I would historically look at that and say, how close was that to the actual? Could I get that within 1, 2, 3 percentage points of accuracy instead of 7 to 12? And so I just started kind of playing around with these reports and putting it in a giant Excel table. And I walked in, and I was like, hey, I think I have a way that we could save I think it was like $3 million. And
no small number, especially when the 18-year-old
and
kid's
I'm like,
walking in.
I'm making $12 an hour and I'm going to save you $3 million. And I showed this pivot table and this like little thing that I built in Excel. And I was like, look, I've lost 12 months. I can get this within a percentage point and a half on average. And I'm like, even if you double it, you're still saving $3-4 million.
And then what happened?
So this is what was crazy is my friend's dad took me and he's like, hey, let's go to lunch. We got in his Porsche 911, drove to the airport in Blackfoot, got on his private jet and went to lunch.
Where'd you guys go? That's
Vegas.
Cool. Okay. Awesome.
And then I was home in time for dinner.
And you were like, I have
So
made
I
it.
got off the plane in Blackfoot and I was like, okay, I grew up on a farm here in Blackfoot. And this guy, Porsche 911 Turbo S, private plane with a pilot, and wrote me a check as a bonus for the work that I did. Didn't come close to $3 million, but dude, getting a $10,000 bonus at 17 years old is life changing.
Absolutely.
And
it changed your vision, right?
It did. All of a sudden, I went from being like, I could really, like, I'm in charge of my own destiny. And I got home and I told my dad, I remember going home and being like, Dad, I don't have to move pipe anymore. I don't have to help you work cows.
Right.
I've got this job in this air conditioned office making $12 an hour. And as soon as I, get the chance, I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to do what that guy does. And I don't have the jet or the 911 Turbo.
Not yet.
Not yet. One day. But it was life-changing for me. Totally elevated my vision. And I realized that day when I got off that plane that, like, no one's coming to save you. No one's going to hand it to you. But if you want it, you can have it. Now, there's a lot of other things that play there. Like, what are you willing
Absolutely.
to sacrifice to get it? And are you willing to sacrifice, certain things? But that day changed my life forever because a guy chose to take a little time for me and say, hey, like, I appreciate what you've done, and made me feel great about myself, and totally elevated my vision and helped me feel like I could reach my potential.
That's so cool. So I asked myself as you were talking, how do I help my kids have these kinds of experiences? Because there's a common theme among a few different founders that can say, I grew up on a small farm.
Yeah.
Where I learned to work hard. That's a common theme. And then getting to sell something and go through the experience, whether it be 4-H, FFA, or some other, a lemonade stand, or buying illegal fireworks and selling them to your buddies in your home state, which was a story I heard last week. Like, how do you recreate? Have you been thinking about that? You're a dad, right? You guys have a couple kids.
I think about it all the time. And I try to ask people who maybe the older generation where I've seen their kids continue to be successful. And one of my really good friends, he's an immigrant from Puerto Rico. And he's like, I've tried to instill in my kids that they're first generation too. And I've thought a lot about that. How could I help my kids like they're, because I've worked hard. I've made sacrifices. I don't want them to feel like the next step of their life is just going to be handed to them, because who I am and what I've been able to accomplish is because of what I've done.
Yeah. The price you paid early, younger in life.
Yeah. The price I paid, and I'm not saying it's a victory lap at this point in my life, but
yeah. You meaning you still feel like there's some prices to pay?
There are. I still have prices to pay.
Especially to go do the big things you want to do.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, for my kids, it's like, okay, how can you instill like self-worth and confidence in being able to do hard things? I mean, that's what you learn on a farm, is you push yourself either to a physical or a mental limit, I think, at times. And it's like, I can do hard things.
Yeah.
I can, you're feeding cows on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, like the cows still need fed. When you're sick, like my dad's been super sick at times, cows still need fed.
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
And it's that dedication, that hard work. It's the man who's out there, I think, just willing to just do what needs to be done because it needs to be done. And that is something that you want your kids to learn.
How'd you get the opportunity to start your first business? Like, how'd you come up with the idea?
Yeah.
Like, I know you said, oh, someday I'm going to do what that guy does, but you're not in the potato business like
No,
him.
I'm not.
So.
But another, if I have to say like another super important moment in my life was the decision I made to serve an LDS mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I went to Jacksonville, Florida on my mission. I still think it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah.
It was the decision I made to go on a mission. I paid for it. I left my current wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. Left that behind. And, it was back in the days where we wrote letters and didn't talk to our families for 2 years, and talk about paying a price. I did. But what came out of that was being able to start my business. And so what ended up happening was, while I was there, I met a brilliant guy who had a digital marketing agency. We were tasked. They were just built a new building in Jacksonville, and we wanted to do a big open house. And so this guy helped me with like TV ads, and dude, we did a bunch of print materials, and we got almost like 4,000 people through an open house at a stake center. And we taught like hundreds of first lessons, had tons of investigators. And it was just like, man, that was a really cool way to use marketing to get people
to help spread the good
gospel.
word.
Yeah,
Okay.
spread the word.
Yeah.
And I got home, and I had a chance to work with that guy for a little while I was on my mission, and I got home, and I guess I should also rewind. I was one of the first missionaries for the church to proselyte using Facebook.
Okay.
So that was in
that's a neat experience.
2010.
Yeah,
So it
way
was
early.
one of like super early on. I had a blog, and I'd reach out to my investigators or people who were looking at the church and talk to them about it on Facebook. And so he helped me with that too. He gave me some tips and ideas, and it was awesome. But when I got home, he was like, dude, I think you got a knack for this. I think you can sell, you can talk to clients, you can learn this. How would you like to start a branch of my company out west? And I was like, sweet.
I think this is the first time I met you was shortly after this, because you were at a Rexburg little like mini business.
Yeah, networking lunch, I think,
event.
is where I met you. something like that.
Okay.
I don't even remember. Yeah.
There was just like a school, it was in a school gym and we didn't like do any business or talk much after this, but I remember like a first experience where you were like, yeah, I've got this digital marketing thing and I'm opening the branch in Idaho. And cause you were working with someone in Florida. That's how I remember. Was that with Perfect Point Marketing?
No, it was before. It was a company called The Fusion Agency.
Yes. Okay.
And there were some awesome clients. Like, dude, we worked with fanatics.com.
Yeah.
This guy that I worked with, he worked with a little company called Wix Lumber, who later launched the direct-to-consumer brand we know as Home Depot.
No way.
He worked at Amazon. He was in the room where they decided to go away from doing just books to start selling tools. So a lot of people don't know that tools was like the next place that Amazon went because I felt like they could go, super deep into a lot of inventory around tools. So this guy just had like an unbelievable resume. And we had a lot of really cool clients, like still I had a chance to work with Cal Ranch, and it was like the biggest check I'd ever seen. I mean, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and it was awesome. And it wasn't too long after that, while I was working at a Fusion Agency, I was working on a little community event. My uncle ran a corn maze, a little pumpkin patch. And we were doing some local news advertising, and they were doing some stuff with some schools, and there was a lady working at the newspaper, was on the committee I was with. And I think I was like super stressed out because I had a ton of clients, and this guy that I was working with was awesome, but he wasn't a lot of help. Like you'd ask him like, hey, how do I do this? Or can you teach me this?
You can figure it out.
And he's like, who taught you how to walk? And I was like, what do you mean by like these really like philosophical responses? Like, he'd answer a question with a question. And he's like, who taught you how to walk? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, did somebody like give you a manual? Did they like give you an instruction book? Did they give you, systems and processes? And I'm like, well, no, we just watched and did it. And he's like, so do that. And so I was like super stressed and just wanting to do a good job for my clients. I mean, I'm 21 years old. And I walk out of that meeting, I think super stressed. And my business partner now, Katie, flags me down. She's like, hey, I want to talk to you. And she was working in the newspaper, and she was like, I think digital is awesome. I want to learn more about it. I think it's like the future.
Yeah, newspapers were starting to see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, they were. And she was like, you should hire me. Like, I think I could make a difference. And I'm like, all right. So I called up this guy I was working with. I was like, hey, I think we should hire this lady. I think she's awesome. And he's like, okay, cool. If you want to hire her, hire her. I was like, okay. So I did.
I can do that?
I can do that? Sure. So I hired her, and we worked together, and about 3 or 4 months in, he was just promising stuff to clients. Like, he'd come help me sell. Like, we'd go just, with his resume, you could knock on any door and get in. I mean, we were talking to huge companies all the time, and he was promising them the world. And I'm like, I got to deliver this. I'm like, dude, I wasn't at Amazon. I wasn't
ready to deliver that.
I don't even know how to do that.
And he's thinking, well, you'll learn.
You'll learn it. And I don't know what his end game was, because it was just constantly this cycle of like, over promise, collect the cash, under deliver, and walk away. And it was just really uncomfortable for me, especially, growing up where I did with the values that I had. And so one day Katie caught me. She's like, look, I'll keep working, but I'm not selling this to anybody I know. And I had felt the same way, that like, I can't do this for people around here. And I don't know I can do it for anybody. And I remember laying in bed one night and being like, telling my wife, Cheyenne, I was like, there ain't no amount of money that's going to help me sleep better at night with the kind of crap that's going on at this place. And it's not that I don't want to do well, because I was like making myself sick over it, but I can't do it. Like, I don't know how. And at a certain point, I think you have to have the humility to say, what they're being sold and what they're getting are two very different things.
For sure.
So I came to her like the next day, and I was like, hey, I think we could just start our own thing. We can set the terms. We can do what we know we're good at. We can figure this out. We don't need him. Maybe it's smaller, but we'll make more money, and we'll be able to have some flexibility and happiness.
Because you had to shift some money back to him every month, right?
Oh, well, he was taking like 90% of it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I was on salary, so was Katie, and then I was getting some profit sharing. Okay. But I wasn't really seeing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where's the money going? Dude?
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when Perfect Point Marketing was born. Okay. So that was in like August of 2012. And it was just kind of, I think most entrepreneurs kind of have that same thought, like, oh, I could do this on my own. Or I have a great idea that I think I can really be passionate about and make a difference. And
Yeah.
that's that little seed that gets planted.
How were you sure you were going to have enough money to pay the bills when you started off on your own?
So,
Because like you and Katie were both on salary before.
Yeah, we
now
were.
You're going to not have that anymore.
I honestly didn't even worry about it. I think there's something that's like thrilling about you eat what you kill.
Just going. I'm going to be hungry enough, I'm going to go find a way.
I'm just gonna make it happen. I think that's takes a special kind of person.
Mhm.
But I was young enough where like maybe I was just dumb enough that you don't really think through all of the consequences of that choice.
Yeah.
There was a great interview from the CEO of NVIDIA that was like, hey, if you had the chance to, like, knowing what you know now, what would you do different, or would you do it all over again? And he goes, I wouldn't have done it. I'm like, what? He's like, I wouldn't have done it. He's like, if I knew what I knew, what I know now, and how hard it was going to be, and how stressful and difficult,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, that's right.
The best thing that ever happened to me is I had no clue how hard it was going to be. And so that's kind of, I think, how it was for me, is like, thank goodness I didn't know how hard it was going to be.
Yeah.
How stressful. Because if I did, I'd probably be a lawyer.
Okay. Taking a quick break from the episode. Sorry to interrupt, but I have to take a second and thank the great team at Pod Allies that helps me produce this podcast. Startups with Stu is not an easy undertaking. It takes a lot of work and team power to get this thing done. So the team I use for my podcast, podallies.com, go check them out if you are considering a podcast. If you've thought you have a dream for a show and you want to go make it happen, go to podallies.com and book a strategy call today. I promise you won't regret it. I was 8 episodes published. I was on, I think, my 12th recording with a guest. And that guest was like, hey, I think I'd like to do a podcast. And I introduced him to the Pod Allies team. He's entirely satisfied with the work they're doing for him. That's the beauty of podcasting, right? Like, I'm not out there day in and day out selling podcasting services. I invested in podup.com, the parent company of Pod Allies, and it's been a joy to work with them, but I didn't have to go and sell this $36,000 deal that came from just having a guest on my show. I think one thing that people don't understand with a podcast is there's more value to be had than just likes, listens, shares, follows, etc., subscribers. You're going to get more than that with a podcast. And one of the greatest benefits is the networking that you can do through your show, getting guests on the show. Speaking of the show or shows, let's get back to Startups with Stu in this episode. Forgive my interruption, but if you're interested, go check out podallies.com.
Yeah. Kevin Plank, founder of Under Armour, once said that they were smart enough to be naive enough to not know what they could accomplish. And at first I was like, what does that even mean? I think what it means is what you just described. The CEO of NVIDIA said, it's like, if you knew how hard it was going to be, you probably wouldn't get started. But once you start, then you go through the hard because you've committed yourself to it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the power of like hiring someone and having to meet payroll, is all of a sudden you're gonna find a way.
Yeah. And I think for Katie and I too, like, I mean, for Katie, it wasn't like her husband was it still is an attorney.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a little bit of a safety net there. And I didn't have any kids, and my wife and I are still young, and our expenses are like, that big. And so I was like, what better time to screw it up and get it wrong than now, without a lot of consequences, without a lot of assets, anything like that. And we didn't need to raise money or go into debt to start the business. I think that always makes a huge difference. We weren't planning on any of our clients that were with that agency coming with us. And we'd sign a non-compete, but a lot of them beat down the door to come with us. And they were like, we do business with Michael. We don't do business with this guy. And so we had a few clients, and that was enough to pay my rent and make a little money. And I didn't need a lot, And it took us a little while, but yeah, I think that it was like, we have unlimited earning potential over here. We own it.
You were young, hungry, naive, and starting a service-based business where you're able to trade hours for dollars like you do in a job anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
And the biggest mistake you make, I think, is you'll just take anything.
The first client that's willing to pay, you're like, yes, please.
Yes, please. Oh, you're going to pay me? Sweet. But yeah, I think that you're just dumb enough to be like, yeah, this is awesome.
Okay, so that was 2012, huh? When you started off on your own at Perfect Point Marketing.
Yeah.
And then what were some of the wins along the way that helped you grow and succeed?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you get a good big client that like pays on time, that was kind of like the main thing. I remember how hard it was to like be the person delivering on that account and then have to go be like, hey, you need to pay me, like you're past due. It's like one of the first people we hired was controller and bookkeeper to, send invoices and help make sure we got paid. And I remember that first hire was really great. They made a big difference in kind of taking the load off of personality like mine, where it's like, I need to like be solution focused and strategic. I don't have the brain to like send invoices, and have those conversations. So I think it's realizing early on, like your strengths and your weaknesses, just putting the right people in place to complement your weaknesses and being humble enough to realize you can't do it all.
Absolutely. You kind of pick which hats you want to keep wearing.
Yeah. And over time, you just consistently kind of take off another hat, with somebody you can afford to actually pay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that, and then I just remember putting in like an insane amount of hours those first couple years. I mean, we're not talking even like 60, 70, 80 hour work weeks. We're talking like dang near 100,
just grinding.
Just working your guts out. And that's like, I don't know that
as a missionary, you did that too, right?
As a missionary, I did that. And as a farm kid, I did that. Like we gave up weekends and holidays. My friends were going on vacations during spring break. I was building fence, like it just didn't stop. There was always something that needed done. So I think that I don't know where the company ends up without like that really hard work ethic. I don't know. I don't know that it makes it past that infancy stage, that first little bit without working long hours.
Continuing to wear the hats when you can't afford to pass them off yet, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's 100 hours.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the job of multiple people.
Tons of people. But I remember, distinctly having a few clients that, paid us really, really well every month. And like we worked with an assisted living facility that had a bunch of locations. Like I remember when we got that deal, it's like, oh, actually we have cash. Like we have leftovers. We could maybe hire somebody.
Yeah.
So I think you always look back on that. And then it was a really big deal when we started partnering with Get Found First. And at the time, Get Found First was only doing really pay-per-click advertising, not doing a lot of web design and development, not doing any SEO anymore. Really, yeah. And so when, you and I and Mark Jensen got together and we were like, hey, why don't we sub that to you guys? And I kind of wore the Get Found First hat. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but I was basically like ghosting as a GFF employee for a while.
Yeah.
And was doing a lot of the SEO for clients. And it was a great partnership because you guys didn't have to worry about the deliverables, but we made really good money, especially because I was the one doing all the fulfillment. Like we didn't have to hire anybody to do that.
Wait, you were building the websites yourself?
So side note, one of the best choices I ever made was I realized very early on that I couldn't do that fast enough by myself. And so I found a guy on Upwork.
Yeah.
His name's Russell. And we connected on Upwork.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the same age as me, living in Bangladesh. And I had all these websites from the prior agency that were built in a programming language I didn't understand. So I knew like PHP and MySQL and HTML and CSS. And so like WordPress was very comfortable for me as a content management system, but his were all built in .NET platforms I didn't know anything about. And so I contacted this guy on Upwork and I was like, hey, can you help me migrate these to WordPress? And he's like, sure. And I'm like, how much? And he's like, I'll do it for $100 each site. And I was like, seriously? Done. And at the time, he was just like a contractor we'd pay when we needed something.
Yeah.
But fast forward 13 years, he's worked for us this whole time.
And now he's got way better. He's like making more money than doctors and lawyers in Bangladesh.
He immigrated to Turkey.
Okay.
He's living the dream. Totally like up-leveled his life. He's got employees that work for him, and we still subcontract some work to him every single day. Like he's an integral part of our team. Yeah. But I bring that up with like, we found again, like those little pockets where it's like, okay, we can get a little more efficient. We could still deliver the level of service that we want without having to, have a ton of cost. And that's super important. Like when you're in that stage,
You have to find a way to do that.
You do. So I was helping edit and build some websites, but for the most part.
And you were the project manager. You
Yeah,
still
I
have
was.
to
I still have to
communicate
coordinate. So I was still doing all that. I was still doing a lot of SEO. But that relationship that we built for a couple of years was huge because it provided predictable, consistent work and cash flow. It's when we were able to hire Michael T., who's our current chief experience officer, was during that
far
time.
back.
That far back.
Michael
Yeah, he
Tamanaga.
worked for us at
Okay.
Perfect Point Marketing.
Cool.
Yeah. So, you look at hires like that. You look at people who have a monumental change on the business. It comes from, that time.
Yeah, you probably had to be Michael J. like every year of elementary school because there was always another Michael, right? And so it was natural to hire a Michael T.
Yeah. Well, what's even funnier is mom will tell this story that, so there was another Michael J. in kindergarten.
MJ, two of them. Okay.
And so I told my teacher that my name was Michael Jordan. And she's like, you can just call me Michael Jordan. And she's like, okay. So my parents go to parent conferences and I told her that my middle name was Michael Jordan Johnson. And so my teacher's like, little Michael Jordan does this, little Michael Jordan does that. And my mom's like, his son's not Michael Jordan. And she's like, oh, he told me his middle name is Jordan. Well, I know it's Michael Johnson. And she's like, it's not, it's Robert. So yeah, nice. Michael J, MJ, it's always kind of stuck. And so yeah, it's just natural. We have an MT and MJ that work
so
here.
With the time we have left, we've got a little bit. I want to cover a few more things.
Sorry, man. I
no,
tell
don't
stories.
apologize. They're good stories. I think it's important for entrepreneurs to hear the stories of founders, not because theirs will be the same, but because there's common threads in entrepreneurial journeys, including, then I met so-and-so. And you'll have moments in your life where you'll meet someone, and if you can recognize, this is like cosmic stars that God wanted to have a line here. Yeah. I need to pay attention to this relationship and foster this relationship because it might mean something bigger later.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's so cool that you and I meet originally in Rexburg, then later at a networking event in Idaho Falls. By the way, I was pissed when I met you because I was like, I paid money to come to this networking event. And I get sat at the table with another guy that does digital marketing. I was like, this is dumb. Like, I'm here to meet people that might want my services. And then there's another guy at the table that does the same thing I do. And neither of them are like, this just stinks. Right. But I remember going, okay, how do I just look at this in a positive light? Like, I'm going to just be friendly with them and see if there's ways maybe down the road we get to work together. And sure enough, we did.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, it was huge.
Yeah,
I think it was great for both of us.
So let's talk about the deal. Because that's, I think, one of the most juicy things for this episode is our little deal that we did.
Yeah. And at the time it was a big deal.
Like for both of us.
I personally guaranteed that I'd pay you.
I remember being like, dude, if you won't personally guarantee it, I'm not doing this deal.
I remember. And so I personally guaranteed that you'd get paid.
Yeah.
I didn't have a ton of assets, but you would have had them had I
whenever
they were. I had a house on Valley Drive in Blackfoot that probably would have been, you'd had to lean against. But, I still remember the terms of the deal because what Get Found First needed, I think we can both agree that given much longer,
it was going to be in big trouble.
It was going to be in big trouble. And
I was passively a silent partner in the business, and my managing partner wasn't running the business.
Wasn't managing.
Yeah.
He was dealing with some real challenging personal issues. And I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
But you can look at that, objectively and say that business wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
And it was even worse than I expected when I actually dove into it that first little bit.
Yeah.
But what ended up being a great deal is that that business needed a manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it needed a leader, and it needed somebody who's going to keep paying the employees and helping them. And you needed that. What else is I didn't have a ton of cash. And so the fact that you had a day job made it so that we could structure this deal in a way that was really attractive for both of us, where you'd get consistent monthly payments similar to your take-home salary, and I'd be able to try to cash flow that. So what's awesome about mergers and acquisitions is that it allowed us to kind of optimize duplicative expenses.
Yep.
So I remember pouring through that P&L multiple times with lots of people to say, okay, I think I can eliminate this. I think I can eliminate that. I think I can save these clients. I think I can do this. and figured out, okay, can I preserve enough cash to where I can make this payment to Stu and Mark with the business's own money?
With the business's own money, yeah.
Right. But because I'm stepping in and managing it. And then my goal was like, okay, maybe in a year I can take home some profits from the acquisition. Just being like, can I just get it to survive and make the payment for the first year and then move on? And plan worked. I mean, I still remember it, $7,198 every month.
I remember that too, roughly. The exact dollar amount comes from the payer, not me remembering that part.
Yeah, I remember
You would.
I remember writing that check every single month.
For 3 years. That was a good little extra income.
And I remember driving to your house, dropping it off, putting it in your mailbox. Because sometimes I didn't get it in the mail fast enough and I didn't ever want to be late. I was worried it was going to be late.
I didn't know that.
That's dude, funny. I remember getting in the car and being like, crap, I got to get this to Stu today because it's the 15th.
I will be calling him, dude, where's my money?
I don't think we were ever late.
No, I don't remember it.
But I remember what it was like to write that check. And I remember how scary it was when I bought the business. And it was really scary when we found out your largest client had canceled. Select Blinds.
Select Blinds. Oh, yeah. Dang it.
Yeah. And so then it was
we still have some clients today, right?
Yeah. Draper Orthodontics.
Oh yeah, Draper Ortho. Okay, my brother's orthodontics practice. Stone's Family Dental. Do they do anything?
Yeah, Stone's still with us.
Okay, that's my brother-in-law's dental practice. Beck Law. That was a good one.
Yeah, they paid us for a while. We worked with ink stores up until about last year.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, and it was really freeing when it was like, we don't have to just take whatever these guys are willing to pay us.
Yeah. Yeah, when it's like, it's worth it to just move on and part ways sometimes with the customer in a service-based business, huh?
Just when they're, and I think it's been good for both of us. But at the end of the day, the way that deal was structured where we functionally were able to buy it with its own money because we had services going on too, made that, like I said, one of the best financial decisions I've ever made, where I don't know that any of my businesses grow the way that we were able to scale without the acquisition of Get Found First. We were able to really double down on our PPC services, which, is kind of like the core of our business right now. It represents like 50, 60% of our revenue.
Yeah.
And people like Paul Hartley.
Still here. I shook hands with Paul at the door and his wife when I walked in, and it was like, oh, that is so cool that when I sold the business 10 years ago or 9 years ago now, I think I didn't expect that 9 years later, anyone would still be working for you. So that's so cool to see.
Paul is awesome. I just think the world of him and his wife, and it's cool to have people that still hang around, that were important in that part of the business and into this next phase. So, yeah, I mean, the way we structured that deal where, you don't have a ton of tax and, challenges because you get a big lump sum up front and capital gains on that.
No, there's all sorts of little creative, nice things about the way that was structured, huh?
Yeah, and if we were able to absorb it, and you had a partner who's going to pay you on time and continue to grow it. So
yeah. And so now, what are some of the wins post-transaction that have helped you guys keep growing? How many employees now at Get Found First?
So we have just under 40. And I think we bought it with 7.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Get Found First has now been on the Inc. 5,000 list 4 times?
3 in a row.
3 in a row.
Yeah, 3 in a row.
Okay. So awesome.
I think we bought it. Revenue was like
330 or so.
400,000.
Yeah.
And we'll do just over 8 million.
That's so awesome. What a cool story, man.
So a little bit of growth. But anyway, at the end of the day, what is, those other milestones that have happened? Like I talked about some strategic hires, which are always great, but my dad's advice to me was, that revenue solves all your problems.
He is not wrong.
And I'm not saying it solves all your problems, but it hides a lot of them. It fixes a lot. You can do a lot with cash and revenue.
Yeah,
you just don't have options without.
Revenue solves problems because it means you have the money to go pay to solve problems. You need people to help you solve the problems, right?
You do. And equity is expensive. So, if you can't pay cash, you got to give up
some ownership.
Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we look at a couple of really great clients that came in. Shortly after I bought the business, I got a phone call from a small little home care agency in Seattle.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, we need help with digital. We saw you online. think they saw us on topseos.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
I
lead
remember that. We
aggregator.
were doing some ads on there.
And they called us, and I didn't really think he had money, but then he told me he was a part of a franchise. And I was like, okay. And so I remember working that deal, and we ended up doing a pilot program with 7 franchise locations. And it was about 2 weeks into onboarding that my grandpa passed away. And I remember being like, how am I going to get these franchisees onboarded and kind of deal with this personal stuff going on? And I remember getting an email from the franchisee that was just like, hey, I heard about your grandpa. Really, really sorry. Take whatever time you need. We'll be here. And I just remember how cool that was. And it sparked this kind of deeper, transcendent relationship with a client where it was like, I just want to do a really, really good job for them because they care about me as a human being, not just as a vendor. And that little home care agency later resulted in about $1 million a year client. Fast forward 12 months.
Wow.
And that resulted in a relationship with a private equity firm that would, refer a ton of other clients. And so when I talk about kind of a spiritual game, you can look at kind of these moments that happen. It's like, there's some other stuff kind of at play here.
Oh, meeting him in Seattle, meeting the private equity group there.
And then it's just there's a ton of clients that have just come from that one moment. And I think that also is important as an agency because it's like, you don't know how important, regardless of the size, a customer can end up being. Like they can, you get somebody who becomes a net promoter times 10 and it's
huge, right? So if we got a lot of entrepreneur founder style listeners on the podcast.
Yeah.
What would you say if they're just getting started with digital? What are the things to go do? Like hire, get found first is the answer, right? But like beyond that, where do you focus? What's the order of focus?
Yeah, there's kind of these 2 things that every marketer should be really, really good at, I think. And it's, can you be really great strategically at identifying problems and being solution focused? We tell our account managers all the time, you should be a trusted digital marketing advisor. Like they should trust you as the expert. So I think you've got to be able to have some critical thinking and strategic skills. And if you don't know how to build those skills, it's like put yourself in situations where you can kind of look at scenarios and try to solve problems and be really avid tester. I think that really great marketers are able to test and try and provide ideas. I think the other half of being a great digital marketer is working on your communication skills, because what I've realized in the last decade of owning an agency is how you communicate as a partner or as somebody who's providing service. I don't care if it's inside an organization or outside of one. You got to be able to communicate value. Mm-hmm. Dollars follow value, not the other way around.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So your amount that you're paid or that you receive is in direct proportion to the value you bring to that situation. So you've got to be able to communicate value. Right. And the language of business is revenue and profit. And so as a marketer, you've got to be able to take your clicks and impressions and all that marketing jargon, and you've got to find a way to translate that into sales. And I think if, the really talented marketers are able to do both of those things really, really well, solve problems and communicate value. And all the other stuff I think is actually kind of noise. Like you can figure out how to manage ad campaigns and build them and optimize them. Like there's tons of resources out there for that. The hardest thing to teach are those soft skills of like being strategic and communicating value.
So what's next, Michael?
Right now, my head's down to the grind to just continue to just build a great organization. Mm-hmm. I love being able to build a really cool agency with, great partners. I've been lucky enough. We talked about this before we even started the podcast, but I think a lot of partnerships have been really bad for people. I've had great business partners. I've had great employees.
Yeah.
Have not had to have, a lot of those hard conversations or challenges that others have had. And so when you have a great partnership and the business is growing, it's just like, man, let's just keep it going.
Yeah.
So right now the plan is just continuing to scale. And I don't know if that's scaling into, more mergers and acquisitions or, I'd love to be a platform and help acquire other agencies and add on services and, build on the success of Get Found First. But as I've gone down the road of finding acquisitions, I realized how perfect of a deal that was and how rare those are to find. And so it's like, do we do that? Do we just, kind of keep focusing on what we're really good at? I think our challenge will be, can we just stay focused on where we can bring the most value to our clients and keep growing it?
Yeah.
So right now I'm 34. So it's like, I got a lot of career years left.
I got you by 6 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
6 years.
Okay. So
6
you
years.
were, when I first met you, you were like,
I was
fresh,
20. I was
huh?
21. I'm pretty sure I was just fresh.
Oh, cool. Okay. Wow. That's so
but
awesome, man.
I feel like I got enough time to, I love what I do. I'm passionate about it, and worked really hard to kind of get to this point. And
Yeah. And when you are unsure what you would do next, don't leave what's working.
yeah, that's the advice I've got from a lot of people is like, unless you've got something that you are really, really sure of and excited about, just keep doing your thing.
Keep doing it. Yeah. Get Found First for me was something that I was a passive owner in, and I wasn't excited about it. And I knew that I had this huge opportunity with Stucant. So it made tons of sense to find a buyer like you guys and move on from it. And then with Stucant, I got to a place where it was like, I don't enjoy the day-to-day of this anymore. And it's not what it used to be for me. And the payday that I can have is enough that I can go figure out what's next for me over time. And by the way, doing this podcast has been such a fun thing for me, especially just getting to be with you today. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah.
But like in general, just getting to build something again is where I really...
Yeah, we're builders. We're entrepreneurs. That's what, it's what fuels us. What gets us excited.
So as long as you can keep growing and building, why leave what you got, right?
Yeah, I mean, and right now I love what I do. I love the people I do it with. It's fun to come to work every day. I mean, there's always a new challenge. I mean, there's stress. I mean, there's nothing not stressful about $250,000 in payroll or whatever it is. And
yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. Got to meet it.
Yeah, you got to meet it every single
And that
month.
doesn't include all the other taxes and stuff
And
that come with
overhead
it. And
all the other garbage.
Benefits.
Yeah, one time I'll tell you about the, other things that are expensive.
But because if you don't worry about that, if you're a founder and you're hearing what we're talking about right now and the benefits and hitting payroll of $250,000 or whatever it may be, like, don't worry about that right now. Go get sales, go work on the first deals, find the right partners that can feed you, like a franchisor that has a bunch of franchises. Find those types of deals, go get those wins, and then you'll have the revenues to solve the problems. I think that's a core message from today's
And I think
episode.
the other core message I would give too is like the things that used to stress me out 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago are nothing compared to the things that stress me out today. My capacity to deal with stress or hard situations has grown, just like I've grown.
Yeah, what used to fire you up and get you so mad, now it's like, oh,
that's nothing. That's not even worth it. If I got fired up about everything that bothered me, I'd be a miserable human being. But I think that's an important lesson too, is like, I think that you look at the end and it's like, that seems so far away, or it seems so hard or so difficult. And it's like, you just take one step at a time and you figure it out.
So if you were to give advice to a kid fresh out of college like you were, getting started, that wants to start a business, what would that advice be?
So my personal experience is to find a way to go all in. I think that if you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, it's never going to reach its potential. So I love the old metaphor of burning the ships, the Napoleon story of them, the conquerors landing on an island and they get off and they have to make it work. And to ensure they make it work, they burn the ships. There's nothing to go back to. And I think that most entrepreneurs at some point have to make that decision. Like, I'm going all in. And
no looking back.
There's no safety net. There's no one coming to save you. There's no going back to anything. And there's something liberating and empowering that comes from that decision of saying, I'm going to make this work no matter what.
Yeah. I really like that. That's
and
great
so
advice.
I think that that's probably my lesson, was like, I had the luxury of going all in. I had a wife that was super supportive. I have a business partner that had my back and was able to just go all in.
I love that. And the wife, the supportive one, has come up a time or 15 already in my first 15 episode recordings. Like, not a wife or specifically, but just like family members that love you and support you, that will cheer you on when you have a bad day. They're there for you. They believe in you. That's so huge. Also, I'll just point out, I just had an episode recording with Nick Greer, the founder of and CEO of Built Bars.
Yeah.
And now he's working on spilt milk.
I had some spilt milk.
Have you had that?
I have.
The
I love
caffeinated
some,
milk.
I love
thought it was
some,
hilarious.
I love spilt milk.
He said that when you are giving advice to an entrepreneur, if he was giving advice to an entrepreneur, one of the questions he asked them is, would you be willing to work on this for the next 25 years? Like, if you're going to start this, would you be willing to stay in charge for 25 years? And he uses that as a good way to gut check you. Like, is your gut really telling you that you can do this and should do this forever? Because if not, then it might not be the right thing for you. Yeah. I like that advice. I think that's really good question to be asking yourself if you're getting started. Well, Michael Johnson, not founder, but CEO of Get Found First, founder of Perfect Point Marketing.
Yeah.
And Spot On Solutions. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me, Michael.
Thanks, Stu. Always a pleasure.
Hey, founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and other listeners of Startups with Stu. Thank you for listening to this episode today. As I mentioned at the beginning, as I mentioned in the middle, I want to take a second again at the end and say, if you haven't yet and you're considering a podcast, go check out podallies.com. They sure help me a lot with the show. And I am so grateful for all that they do to help me accomplish Startups with Stu and get it out to the world so we can help more founders and take your startup to the moon. Go check out podallies.com and podup.com if you're interested in podcasting at any level.
Thanks for joining me on Startups with Stu. We have big goals to help millions of entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to share it with someone else that needs to hear it, or leave a review. Remember, success is within reach for those who dare to dream big and take action. Until next time, keep pushing forward on your entrepreneurial journey.